Thank you very much, Jonathan. Any discussion? Yes?
When do I make a motion? I'd like to make a motion to reopen one of the articles that was approved last week.
Why don't we do it after the Blue Hills Technical Regional
Okay,
discussion?
thank you.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? There's 2 of you. Okay, 2 abstained or 3 abstained, and the rest voted for.
Abstain.
Oh, you're abstaining. Okay. So do we have enough for a majority there? If 4 of you abstain? 1, 2, 3, 4. What'd you say?
Do you want the ayes again?
Yeah, let's do the ayes again. All those in favor of the minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Bob, do you want to come on over? Thanks very much. Someday we need a lesson in how to deal with the minutes, because as far as I know, you don't have to have been at the meeting to vote the minutes, but I understand why people are uncomfortable voting for minutes that they weren't there for.
I'll look into that for you.
Yeah, well, the Warrant Committee gets reconstituted every year, so for the
Don't
new
remind me.
for the new for the new committee to approve the warrants of the minutes of the last meeting,
Yeah.
it might be necessary sometimes for you to approve minutes that nobody was there for,
point.
as an example. But
Fair
anyway,
point.
thank you so much for coming in to chat with us.
So I really wanted to come in to thank you all. You're probably the hardest committee to go fill in town. I mean, when I call people when you're in the moderator role, the thing you really got to get used to is people hanging up and not returning your calls. I'm actually a data guy. It takes 4 calls to get one of you to serve on the Warrant Committee. I think we have a lot of employees in town that are paid for doing their jobs. We have a lot of elected officials in town that are paid a little bit for doing their jobs, and we thank them. But really, this town is, if people don't know it watching on cable access at home, this town runs, I've heard the phrase before, on the backs of somebody. It runs on the backs of the volunteer committees. I mean, I think the moderator appoints about 10, I think it's 60 people, all with different specialties. You probably have the toughest job in terms of the load you carry, as you well know. So I just wanted to just make a couple comments kind of for the record and for those watching at home. I'm one of those geeks that actually watches you guys at home on Monday and Wednesday nights. So according to our bylaws, the town shall have an advisory committee to be known as the Warrant Committee, consisting of 15 legal voters of the town. And on or before the 5th day of July, in each year, the moderator shall appoint 15 members to the Warrant Committee, each of whom shall serve for a term of 1 year, beginning on the 15th day of July of that appointment. And it shall be the duty of the Warrant Committee to inform themselves concerning those affairs and interests of the town, the subject matter of which is generally included in the warrants for its town meeting. And the officers of the town shall, upon their request, furnish them with facts, figures, and any other information pertaining to their several departments. It doesn't mention anything about Facebook campaigns or social media or email barrages, none of the stuff you have to deal with. So none of that's in the job description, yet you do it anyways. So the thought I might want to leave all of you, just again as a thank you, is this famous quote by Teddy Roosevelt. I think it was given on April 23rd, 1910 at the Sorbonne in Paris. And pardon the lack of political correctness in gender, but he says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who daring greatly knows that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So you are our folks in the arena, both here with the homework you do, with the emails you read, with the budget you present, with the noise you get from all the citizens in town who all got a dog in the fight. So I just want to let you know, thank you for saying yes when I picked up the phone, for agreeing to do this, for doing all the hard work. And so I'll give you a round of applause just for all the hard work you guys do. And I'm going to make sure everybody knows at town meeting as well.
Thank you very much.
So thanks very much. Keep up the good work. I'll see you all on first Monday in May.
That's right.
That's it.
See you soon,
Thanks,
Bob.
Michael.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Do you folks want to come up and join us at the table? We have a team of folks from the Blue Hills Regional Technical High School. Yes, of course. So you dropped off some printed materials for us, and Julia passed them out while you're sitting down. I just want to say we all have them in front of us, and is anybody missing one? Oh, you guys weren't here last week, right? So you were, but you didn't get the printout?
Didn't get it.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks. Take a look at it.
Julia, you don't have any other copies, right?
I don't, sorry.
I think I just have one, and there's two that are. This was left
Two
here,
here,
so
but-
I think you just forgot it.
We can share one more. We can share one too. That's fine.
So, would you mind introducing yourselves?
I'll introduce them, seeing
All
my
right.
job, you know.
Okay.
Best Joyce, I'm the board member from Milton to the Regional School Committee, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce some really bright guys. We're lucky to have the school that we got there. I mean, if you look in the, I know you've got plenty to read, but if you look at how our school rates against all the other vocational schools, it's number one, okay? And these are the guys who run the place, so I'm only too glad to introduce them. The superintendent, if I can remember his name. Jim Quillia is a super guy. We're lucky to have him, and he's the boss, and his assistant. They're like Mick and Maya. He does. He's the assistant and also the business manager. And a real gentleman. From he's only with us a year, right?
No, this is 3 years now.
Yes, it's
3 or 4 years. Yeah. Stephen Moore.
Shows you how time flies by. For me,
And he is
I've
having
been there for 40 years, so I think it's, it's 3 weeks. Thank you, though. So these gentlemen, they can answer any question that you might have, and I just want to be here to testify that you are, or we are very lucky to be involved with the school, and we work very hard at keeping it number one. Thank you.
Thanks, Festus.
All right. So with me tonight is Stephen Moore, and of course, the inimitable Mr. Fest Joyce. I have been to this committee, I would say, probably about 8 times over the 11 years that I've been involved with the school. This is my 7th year as superintendent, and I'm very glad to be here again. This year, what's a little different for us, and I can tell that that you read a little bit about this because you know a little of the timeline already, which is a good sign. Before we get into the budget, the actual assessment and the operating budget, I'd like to go over sort of an overview of the proposed building project, because not right away, not for the first couple of years, but if this passes, and hopefully it will, it's going to be a major driver of our assessment calculations and various other financial machinations for the next probably few decades. So let me explain sort of what we're doing. It is this horizontally oriented flip chart here, and the reason why it's that way and not like a regular book is because a lot of this was reduced from a very long PowerPoint presentation. You'll notice on the first page it talks about who's involved with the school building committee, who the owner's project manager is, the design architecture firm. And the one that's missing from this and has been recently chosen but not contracted with yet is a construction manager at risk firm who are known as Consigli. There may be people that actually know of that name from various other projects. They come extremely highly recommended. So why? What is the need for this project? The need for the project is, and it talks about it a little bit down on that page and elsewhere throughout this document, but we have a facility that is in its 51st year. And any of the buildings that you have been involved in replacing, at least in your own municipality, by the time you reach that age, even if the building is structurally sound, there's always a need to do a serious renovation and replacement of deep systems such as your HVAC. In our case, our building has never been sprinkled and needs to be in order to bring it up to code. Our fire enunciation system needs to be replaced. So that's fire suppression, fire enunciation. PA system is next to shot. We've had two major failures of the HVAC loop throughout, the heating loop throughout the building. One last winter and one the winter before. And each time we had a failure, it flooded a complete office suite. And so those type of things are becoming more and more frequent. It's just speaking to the fact that a lot of these systems and a lot of the conditions of the school are sort of at the end of their useful life. So that being said, the history behind this is we produced, actually, I have done all but one of them, statements of interest to the MSBA for the past 6 years. And there was one done before me, before I became superintendent. And the last statement of interest, the last SOI, was the one that caught the MSBA's attention. And I'm not sure whether it's the fact that we did include very well-crafted language such as end of useful life, which is a term that construction and architectural professionals use. But it may have just been the fact that we hit the 50-year mark last spring, and you tend to be taken a little more seriously in terms of need when you reach that milestone. So with that, let me just talk about the major components of the project. You'll notice that I could have put in a lot more than this, but there are some pictures that I included throughout the document that always try to, they try to illustrate the areas of need, like some of the spalt concrete on stairs in the corner of a building that needs to be repaired. But the fact of the matter is the actual steel and masonry structure of the building is in very good shape. That's what the architects refer to as the bones of the building, and the bones are in very good shape in that building, and they feel very clearly that it can withstand another 50 years, which is the target of doing a deep renovation of a building like this. Like I said, it's not, to just throw the word out there, it's not what you would call a sexy project at all. There's really not a lot of curb appeal to this project because you're not going to be looking at a building that is substantially different. It's not a building that has any type of expansion figured into it. We had, early on in the MSBA interaction, in the MSBA process, they did a capacity study of the school and the facility relative to the catchment area of the 9 sending towns. We are very close to right where we should be and right where the maximum would be. Judging by the amount of students that are available as 8th graders, the amount that we enroll every year, and the amount that the building can hold, we're only off by about 30 to 40 students. So we're not expanding the building. In fact, we're involved in a special subcategory that of the MSBA. Now, I'm not sure whether your high school was done under the old SBA or the MSBA, but they have 2 main programs right now. They have the accelerated repair program, which is reserved for boilers, windows and entries, and roofs. Then they have the core project, which is new buildings and deep renovations such as this one that's being proposed. We fall clearly into the core project, but because of the nature of the systems that are being replaced and a couple of other factors, they're putting us on what they call it's basically an accelerated span of time compared to a regular ground up, starting from dirt construction project. They call it, what is the term they use for it?
Limited scope repair?
Limited scope repair. So the scope of the building doesn't include a brand-new structure. What it does is it includes a limited scope, which is basically systems and other repairs that need to be done to the existing structure itself. The problem with that, as you'll see, is that it doesn't match up well for presentations. When we get into the actual timeline of this, having to come back to towns in order to procure yes votes for a project in the fall it runs the risk of appearing disingenuous to the people of any particular municipality. So I have to explain right up front, the timeline was not ours. It's not of our choosing. It's usually much better to do as we're doing now. The Warrant Committee, the FinComs in the other towns, you explain the scope of the project at the same time as you're explaining your operating budget and assessment strategy. The problem is that we can certainly answer questions for the people that are aware of this. We can answer questions as they might come up at town meeting later in the spring, but the actual vote isn't needed until the fall. Now, for towns that are not going to have a fall meeting, that becomes problematic. And for those towns that do not plan on doing that, it kind of puts you in a situation where you have to spend money to plan a fall town meeting if you chose to vote no, because non-action equals a yes vote. And which, strangely enough, that's kind of the way the subsection of the law is written on this. So we are currently in what they call schematic design, and that schematic design phase will continue all the way through May and into June. And by the time that wraps up, the ballpark figures that we're using will be subject to a more sharpened pencil, and we'll have more exact figures. But I will tell you, the figure that we are promulgating at this point in time is due to be reduced. It's already dropped a few million because of some choices we've made along the way, either value engineering or the choice of certain, the construction manager came in less expensive than we expected. So we don't expect this to be the amount that's actually put out here in the book, and we're going to attempt to reduce it even further over time. But that was a rough number just to carry. The final number will be, the more accurate number, will be approved, hopefully, by the MSBA in August. I believe it's August 21st or sometime around there. After that, there's a timeline that Steve will talk about, because they trigger the need for a vote a certain number of days after that. So you can see on the page that says major components of the renovation, you're talking building envelope work, which is windows and entries, glazing, replacing the entire HVAC throughout the building, with the exception of, I believe, we're still going to be able to use our boilers, which were purchased about a decade ago under a performance contract. Anyone that was on this committee long enough would remember that. Electrical work, plumbing work. This idea of accessibility and ADA, I certainly never wanted the project that we're looking at right now to come up to the level that it is right now, cost-wise. I'm a little skittish, but perhaps I just don't have the salesman gene. I don't know what it is, but it's hard for me to come ask for this. But because I never expected the project to become what it is in terms of the dollar figure right now. However, there have been two principal drivers in that, neither of which we have any control over. One is the value of the property. Once you cross over a certain value of your property, you now are required to bring the facility up to ADA compliance throughout the facility. internally, externally. I mean, you can get certain waivers, but they're not going to grant you a whole lot of them.
Do you mind if I interrupt you? I just wanted to set the expectation with the committee that we're not taking any action
No.
on this project tonight, and you're going to have to come back before this committee, probably for a much longer presentation
Sure.
after August.
Okay, fine.
So I wonder if we could keep it a little higher level
I
in
will.
terms of just giving us the heads up for what's coming down the road.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
So, given compliance, there's some other improvements, but I gave you the history of MSBA and the renovation timeline. I mentioned the fact that we're in schematic design, so a lot of this I've covered already. Now, I basically hand it over to Steve, and he talks sort of very quickly about the project funding timeline. And if I didn't lead you to this page, I believe on the fourth page, it said the anticipated project cost, $86,500,000, with MSBA reimbursement estimated between 50 and 53%. We figured that 53% will be ratcheted down to a sharp, even 50% by the time they get done disallowing a couple of things here and there. They don't pay for everything. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
All right, so just talking briefly about the funding, we're completing the feasibility phase of the project. That had a cost of slightly under $1 million. That is ongoing this year, and that is being funded by the district. A year ago, we sent a letter to towns asking to increase our budget using available E&D, and we did that. That money runs out in July, and that phase of the project runs out in July. The MSBA is anticipated, as the superintendent said, to vote in August, and we'd like to break ground next May or June of 18. To get the project online. So that means that we're still going to have to feed the design team some funds to pay for the design work prior to receiving the approval to borrow. And so we've put some money into next year's budget, and you can see that there is $647,000 on top of the $600,000 already in capital. That was earmarked for that. You take away the $85,000, and you come up to about $1.3 million is in the budget. Now, that's being offset with E&D and reallocating some capital project funds that are coming offline because we're not going to be doing the electrical switchgear project that we set aside $400,000 for, and we have $300,000. So you'll see, in essence, that the entire budget goes up considerably. Once you add in that $600,000, the operating budget was roughly a 3% increase, or $578,000. You'll see that the total assessment passed on to the towns was even less than that. So we're using money that's already available to the district to fund the project for at least into January. We would be asking towns to vote on borrowing, and the first round of borrowing, we have to fund the whole project, so it would be a vote to ask for, at this point, $86.5 million. We think that will be less. Towns will have to vote on that. We anticipate borrowing an initial round of bands shortly thereafter for $10 million. Then 6 months later, doing a first round of bonding for the first half of the project, and then in the summer or fall of 19, bond the remainder. So the first payment that our member towns will have to make on this project will not come until 2020. The FY19 payment, and there's a sheet here that you should all have in your packet that shows the first 10 years of the borrowing. These would be 30-year bonds that we're going out to do. The first year, FY19, is $790,000. The district should have some MSBA money come back, especially from this feasibility project, to pay for those. So the assessment in 2020 beyond the operating budget would increase by $109,000 for Milton. And then in 2021, when the full project cost comes in, it would increase by $157,000. Now, that's based on what we know today. The assessment apportionment is based on a 4-year average of the percent of students from Milton that are enrolled in the district. So if you want to get an idea how, regular that will be, if you look on the other side of this paper, the very bottom, there's the number of students that are in each of the grades currently. That shows you that. There's an enrollment history around the middle, and Milton is always around 50 students. It has been for the past 7 years, and we can go back and look. So I think that the payments would stay relatively the same. You could also look at the bottom and see how many students from Milton are applying and how many are accepted. So Milton has been a steady 50-ish students for quite some time. So,
Steve, could I ask you a question about the flip side of this?
yes,
So let's just pretend for a minute that our assessment is going to stay flat at $830,000 going forward. In fiscal year 19, would you would expect you would add about 44,000 to that 830, and then in fiscal year 20, are you saying you'd add an additional 109,000, and then the next year you'd add an additional 105,700?
the 44 would be in the district's budget, but there would be an offset of using some funds that came back on the MSBA project and go into our MSBA fund. So that would not get added in 2020. In 2021, the $109,000 would be added to the assessment.
Okay.
All right, and that depends on what also happens with the budget in general. And the district's very much aware that if we're going to be having some capital project assessments all of a sudden come on to the budget, then we need to have a very lean budget in those years to make sure that the impact on the member communities is relatively small.
What I'm trying to ask is, for instance, in fiscal year 21, this chart says that the Milton project assessment would be $157,884.
Correct.
Is that in addition to what has been added to the
No,
to the
that's in
assessment
total.
previously?
So it
Okay.
would be an increase of, roughly $40,000.
Okay.
Or roughly $50,000.
Great,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Yeah, so those are the payments each year.
Did you have a question over here?
I did,
And then I'll come
just
to-
looking at page 16 here in the launcher book,
Which, is it the budget one or the assessment one?
the budget one.
Oh, okay.
So it looks like you show average number of applicants from Milton as 27 with a 75% acceptance ratio. I think you were saying that you have 50 students on average from Milton. Is that in totality, or?
That is ninth grade applicants, so that's only reflects the ninth grade.
Okay,
So, and of that, 75% of them are accepted, so that's roughly 3/4 of those get accepted, and then half of that actually attend.
okay.
So you're looking at about 17 students probably every year. That's the 7-year average. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Does that make sense,
Yep.
Steve?
So, a couple questions. As far as the debt service, is that going to vary for communities from time to time, or from year to year, or is that going to lock in at the beginning of the project? Your share is going to be throughout the project this?
My understanding of the regional agreement is that it's recalculated every year using a new 4-year average. So it won't spike dramatically from year to year. And this is, the projection that I gave you assumes the same 49 students throughout the period of time.
Okay. So, second question, a lot of what it seems like you're doing on the envelope and on the heating is going to generate some pretty significant, or should generate some pretty significant energy savings, which is an operational cost. So is there an opportunity to segregate some of those savings and plow them back into debt service, and rather than, just...
Sure. Do you want to?
It actually, the way we're seeing it right now, these systems are being replaced because they're at the end of their life. They are efficient.
Yep.
However, there will be some savings in terms of energy use because of their efficiency. But every one of the new systems requires you to do some type of service contracting with the manufacturers, with some type of organization that is going to back up the digital controls, you name it. In fact, I just started going over some of these things with, my facilities director today, and we had a conversation about this. And we came up with a ballpark figure of about $100,000 of extra contract costs that actually don't exist right now because these systems are old, they're paid for, and they don't, they're not modern. They don't have systems that need to be either monitored or repaired, warranted, that type of thing. What I don't know is what the expected savings in utility costs would be at this point in time, because we're still trying to choose. We had a choice originally between 3 different types of HVAC systems. There was one that was more expensive and much more complicated than the other. We're backing away from that. So we think we're probably going to end up in the middle of the road between the 3. So when we have another meeting Thursday, at that meeting, that choice will likely be made, and then they'll generate calculations after that. So it's really almost impossible to answer your question right now, but I did want to give you the flip side of the scenario, which are these added costs that were never part of our structural.
Right, but replacing those single pane windows, you should burn a heck of a lot less fuel to heat that building.
You know, it's funny. You would expect that you will, but it's not the kind of thing where you're going to recoup a lot of the cost. It'll take you the life of the loan to actually get that investment back.
Yeah,
you are
I'm
gonna
not
burn,
looking
yeah.
at it so much as getting the life of it back, but if suddenly you're saving $200,000 or $300,000 on fuel, that can either go toward debt service and help the communities, or it can get plowed back into the school.
Well, that's
and
true,
the
but
assessment goes up.
There's also other figures. There's also other parts of that which are, you're going to have radically increased electrical costs because the HVAC systems are more complicated now. You have units that are running on and off all the time, which are basically make-up air, because the air exchange rates that are required for these types of buildings now, they're requiring a lot more outside air. That air has to be conditioned to a certain degree, not air conditioned, but has to be conditioned with some type of entropy wheel or whatever. But those devices are going to suck up electricity.
Let's say you did end up with energy savings. Do you even have the ability to set the town assessments such that you would be dedicating some of those savings to debt service, or do your requirements to pass? Yeah.
It would show up in just new numbers in your budget.
It would be a reduction in the operating budget.
In the operating
which would
budget.
then drive the assessment down. One area where you will see initial savings right away would be we do set aside $600,000 every year for capital projects, and that has been spent every year as this building has gotten older. In the at least first couple of years, if not longer, that $600,000, a good portion of that will go towards debt payment. So that will reduce the assessments also. So, and that's not reflected here, whatever the district can also put into that.
Okay.
So the idea is to try and gradually increase the assessments, not, not
have
go
a
boom,
huge
boom,
jump,
not have
yeah.
$100,000 all of a sudden 1 year. As you know, the assessment varies by the students that you have enrolled in the district. This year, Milton's fortunate, the enrollment dropped, and you're seeing some savings. But if this first assessment in FY20 comes through and Milton's enrollment has increased, you could see a considerable increase in your assessment, just enrollment related. So it's
Yeah,
something
and
we have to be cognizant of.
My apologies to the gentleman in the corner. It's just, I don't have figures yet where I can
I'm not
definitively
asking
answer
for
it.
figures, I'm just asking to keep your eye on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do whatever we can to reduce the cost to the districts, to the member towns.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the project? We can just touch briefly on the budget and the assessment if you'd
Well, I
like.
think you have to have all of your member towns agree to this, or they'll
correct,
default
sure.
or they'll default agree if they take no action. What happens if one of them votes against
We need
the increased assessment?
9 of 9. If one of them says no, the option the district has is a district-wide popular vote. And then we just need a simple majority, so it could go to that if someone says no. And to be honest, if someone's going to say no, we'd like to know sooner than later, so we don't get everybody in gear to go and have their town meetings. If, someone's already said no, we don't need a yes, unfortunately.
When you say district-wide popular vote, you mean a ballot referendum?
A ballot
for the-
referendum for all 9 communities.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on the building project before we talk about the operational budget? Jay, do you
Yeah,
have
I'll just
anything else?
briefly go over, because I know you've had the materials for a little while. We'll go a little bit backwards in looking at the book with the green, 2017, 2018. That has the assessment calculations in it. As we've gone over in past years, the assessment calculation is a combination of a lot of things. First of all, it's what the state says that Milton has to provide to the district. That is in the green column on page 11. And then if you look on page 15 is a chart that breaks down how those calculate into per pupil calculations, because it is a different amount for each of our member communities. The district is anticipating a 5% increase in Chapter 70, so that is built in there. If we get more than that, we will reduce the assessment to our member communities, as we have done in the past couple of years. If we get less than that, too bad for us. This is what we're asking for, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. As you can see, Milton's overall student population decreased by 6 students in this year. District enrollment was down in total, so there were some communities you could have a decrease in students, but still an increase in assessment, because your percent of students becomes larger. So math plays all kinds of games with this on this one. So the overall assessment is a decrease of $71,562 for Milton next year. And that is enrollment. Overall, the entire assessment district-wide is up $568,000, and that is the increase. The E&D that's being used is, and that's essentially our free cash, it's the money that we have left at the end of each year, is $666,000, I believe. I don't think it's reflected on here. That is, and it's all right. I think it's okay for us to use it this year because it's for a one-time cost, so it won't create a problem. Last year, $300,000 was put in there. There's a chart on page 8 that shows the E&D that's historically been applied. So there's 660 of E&D. That's all the money that the state certified that the district had. Once we knew this project was approved last year by the MSBA, the district put the brakes on spending to try and accumulate some E&D, so we would have it moving forward into this year. And then there was $332,000 in the capital project fund that will get moved into the budget as well. And we still had to make up the shortfall from the year before. So that's how the assessment breaks down. Just quickly on the operating budget, and that's the other book. If you look at page 5, is a summary of our operating budget, and that's just operating budget only, because we wanted to be able to come here and tell you that we had a 3% increase in our operating budget. That does not include the money put in for the capital project. So if you look down below on page 6, we're actually asking for an 11.6% increase, or $1.3 million. But you can see that the assessment is only going up roughly the amount of the budget, so you can see the offset there with the other funds. Just to touch briefly on some of the initiatives that the district will be doing, page 7, 8, and 9 talk a little bit about that. MCAS scores have been strong for the district. The district is still level 2, and that's predominantly because of underperforming subgroups in mathematics and We are targeting some funds at improving that next year, using a lot of Title I funds, and by adding another position in a needed program, we'll be able to move some things around. So we're having some targeted math for sophomores, that's the MCAS grade, so they will get the interventions they need to perform at a high level on the MCAS, hopefully. The criminal justice program, which we introduced 2 years ago, is now adding juniors for the first time. We had one instructor in that program. Sophomores come 1 week, freshmen come another week. He was able to teach full-time criminal justice. Next year, freshmen and juniors are there at the same time. We need another instructor because he cannot deal with the 50 students. They both are on a separate curriculum path. So that is added. On the off week, that teacher will be teaching some electives. That frees up people in our academic program from teaching electives and will create opportunities for our math program to do those targeted interventions on students. So some students will be taking 2 math classes next year, which we felt was important. The other big initiative that the district is currently ongoing with is our retention program, and it deals with getting the right student for the right reason in the right program. Blue Hills is very fortunate that it works well with the districts, many, especially Milton, in attracting students. Blue Hills wants to make sure that it's getting the right student for the program, that the student's coming with the right reason for being there, knows why they're there, and we want them to complete their program. We don't want them to come back to the Milton Public Schools in 2 years because they will have not had the same educational opportunities as Milton High School students because they're in a vocational program. So it's very important to us that students complete their program. One of the things that we've done is part of introducing the light at the end of the tunnel so you can see where you're going is the career tree, which is on page 9. And this tree hangs in every one of our vocational program areas, and it lists the career and lifestyle opportunities available to students who go into a program. This tree here is for electronics, technologies. It has entry-level positions. It has technical careers. It has professional careers. The careers aren't rated by what they pay. They're rated by the additional education required to achieve that next level. There are some entry-level positions that probably pay more than professional positions. It's just that you need to get additional education. So we're trying to set that light at the end of the tunnel, giving students an opportunity to look forward to what they're doing, where do they want to go. From day one, students hang a leaf on the tree with their name and write what they want to do. They're free to change it as much as they'd like during their time at Blue Hills, but ideally, it's they leave with their leaf and they go in that direction. That's what we want to do. We want the students to be successful. Our budget is measured by the success of our students. Nothing more, nothing less. We could spend $1, we could spend $100 million, but if our students aren't successful, we've wasted either the dollar or either or. So I think that's all I have for tonight.
Any other questions? Yes, Betty?
Can you speak to the initiative that you outlined on page 7 about reducing class sizes for grades 9 and 10?
And then specifically with the mathematics program, again.
It said writing and technology, too.
All right, on page 7.
It's right in the second sentence on the top.
Okay, sure. Well, along with the math one is really the addition of the second teacher helps with that. The English classes were addressed last year by bringing in the social studies teacher that we brought in last year. We hired a social studies teacher, and that allowed that teacher to teach additional sections of social studies and free up English teachers from teaching electives. And so that created more sections of electives for students with a social studies teacher, and that allowed English teachers to have smaller classes and more core English programs. So it's a continuation of an initiative started last year.
Is there an average class size for your?
If If you average all classes in the building, and that includes vocational classes where you can only have so many students per teacher because of safety, I believe we're somewhere between 13 and 14 right now. The contractual maximum is 30. And there are, the largest classes in the building numbers-wise are lab sciences. We have a cap of 24 on those, and there are many at 24. And a lot of the social studies classes are 28, 29.
Most of the academics are in the low 20s.
Yeah. And especially if you have a co-taught class or an assisted class that has a significant contingency of students on IEPs, then you'll probably see a cap of about 21 students in that class.
And can you tell me how many students you have that are on IEPs?
It's about a quarter of our student population.
26,
24,
24,
25,
yeah.
26. It runs between 24 and 26 all the time.
All right. I have one more question.
Yes?
So, from what I remember last year, the only time students can enroll is the 9th grade.
They can enroll in 10th grade.
They can. Is that
Yes.
something new?
No, it's been going on, but it's enrollment into specific programs. We let it be known at the time. In fact, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've actually run ads saying where the specific spaces are in the specific programs. So you tend to backfill a little bit at the beginning of the sophomore year, and then that's about it.
Okay. And from when you have a student that decides, after maybe doing 9th grade at Blue Hills, that it's not for them, or maybe they're not a good fit for the school, how do you decide, or how do they decide to unenroll?
Well, we don't decide it for them. That's usually their decision, their family's decision. It's not, we don't, there's sort of an old misnomer that goes back decades about sending students back. That doesn't happen. It's, if it's not the right fit for them, they have the right to return to their municipal sending district and school system, and that's it.
Any other questions? Thanks so much for coming in, guys.
thank you.
We'll look forward to a much longer discussion on the building project in the fall. Well,
All right.
in the summer, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, summer would be a very good time to do that because, well, if I could make a suggestion, August.
Yeah, it has to be after your August decision, right? And
Well, that is, I'm hoping that's perfunctory and that the MSBA just goes along with it. What I'd like to do is come back here sometime in the middle of August, because I plan, once we get through schematic design and I have better and more accurate information to put another one of these together, I intend to do so the towns can really dig into this a little more.
does anybody know off the top of their heads when the warrant is due to go to the printer for the October town meeting? Be like the beginning of September, probably? Okay, yeah, so that timing will work out well.
The end of August would be great.
Okay, so we'll have sorry, Maggie, I didn't hear what you said.
Do you still teach culinary?
Yes, we do.
Perhaps when they come back, they can bring us.
Bring food. All right, so
In August, I'm going to have to cook them myself.
we'll have the new chair after July 1st be in touch with you about scheduling that.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I heard the school food's really good.
Regardless of whether or not it's me, it's a new
People
chair.
actually.
So, one of the impacts of what we just heard is that the Blue Hills assessment is going to be lower than what we had budgeted. See you later, Fess. Than what we had budgeted. So we're going to have a discussion a little bit later about how we reallocate some of that money in the non-contingent budget. So we are going back to that, and we'll have to send some money somewhere. There are also some other little changes that I'm waiting to hear back on from Amy Dexter as well. She's traveling this week at a conference. So we'll talk about that. But first, the Board of Selectmen is here, and we want to ask them a few questions about the outstanding Board of Selectmen sponsored articles. Do you folks want to join us at the table?
everyone.
Hi. I think I saw David too, right?
He bugged out for a second. I forget why.
Okay.
Is he out in the hall? I'll just check.
Okay.
Are you ready for snow?
Yeah. I got the gasoline for my snow blower today and piled the ice melt next to the door.
There you go.
We're not having snow, it's snow.
Canceled all my appointments tomorrow since I'll be providing childcare.
Coming right back. He just ran
Okay.
upstairs.
All right, well, if I can just provide a quick summary of a discussion that I had earlier with Chair Conlon. There are two Board of Selectmen endorsed articles that we have been putting off voting because we're waiting to hear back from Town Council on how to word the recommendation. So we're still not able to finalize the votes on those tonight, on the solar credit and the traffic study revolving accounts, because we're still waiting to hear back from Town Council on those. You didn't have anything else to add on those two, right?
No, I don't think there's been any update on that.
No.
I'm not aware of.
Okay. All right, and then in terms of the traffic, the traffic commission recomposition, Chair Conley, you're hoping to discuss that next Monday because you're still gathering some feedback on that one, right?
We are, yes.
Okay.
So we would appreciate you deferring that a little bit longer. We've sent it out to some additional people. We did get your questions and comments last week, and we're following up on those with some of the members of the Traffic Commission and with some, we've sent it over to Town Council and some others to take a look at, so.
Great.
Master Plan Implementation Committee, we're hoping to get input from that committee, and the chair of that committee did give some comments, but we haven't yet heard from everyone on that committee.
Okay. And I think that leaves the Fire Station Building Committee, is that right? Or is there another one that I'm missing?
I don't, oh, the roadway stabilization
Oh,
fund.
Stabilization.
Roadway Stabilization Fund.
Fire station's building committee,
Well, all right, I'm going to be recused on that one, so
Yeah,
why
so
don't
I can
then we'll come back and we'll do roadway
kind of bring up
stabilization.
date on a few things.
All right.
Because Capital Committee met on it, was it last Thursday? And had a long discussion with Steve Marash, and, basically came to the conclusion, we support there being a building committee and kind of bring it to the next, the next stage. We did not support $2 million, simply for the fact we don't have a capital project, and, that would obviously need to be bonded if you're going to spend $2 million, and it would be a 5-year bond, and it would just kill the debt service ratio and, hurt future capital projects. So, we did discuss amongst the committee, and this Thursday we will vote on it, a lesser amount of seed money, maybe something in the order of $30,000 to $50,000 of free cash going to seed that committee, to be able to hire consultants and do smaller types of things necessary to kind of advance the planning of of the building, as opposed to the actual A&E portion of the building. And where that would come from, we had again, we haven't voted it yet, but where it would come from is we had $150,000 recommended for the town clerk's archive project, which would basically fund the whole project. You had asked us last time, wasn't that already funded for $15,000, and indeed it was. So that was really now $135,000. So the recommendation was, why not take that 150, bring it down to 100? That still allows her to make a significant dent in her archiving project, and free up 50 grand to fund the building committee with. So that's kind of the thought process right now, but we haven't voted it. And obviously, the selectmen support the formation of a...
Can I just add that the thought on the $2 million being tough to do because you don't have the full scope of the project, so it needs to then be bonded over just 5 years. Whereas I think the thought is if you can put some seed money towards the project with some free cash, you might be able to get the full capital project plan together. in which case you would have the full cost of the project and then be able to bond that over a much longer period of time.
Yeah, well, the next step would actually be coming back to town meeting and asking them to approve a capital project, which would obviously be some fashion of a debt exclusion override vote. You know, the exact numbers, the exact, how that would work, because that home rule petition that I had sponsored a couple of years ago is still kind of kicking around out in third reading in the legislature, and that could impact how that all happens and the timing of it too. So there's a lot of things we don't know at this point, but like I said, it is ripe to move forward.
So the Capital Improvement Planning Committee is coming back together again.
On Thursday.
Thursday night, I think, right?
Yep.
To talk about this, and then we're meeting again next Monday. I hope to make the last of the votes that we'll make for the warrant to go to the printer on Wednesday. We then have a meeting a week later. If we needed to re-vote something and make some small changes to the printer, that's still acceptable. But we can't be making large wholesale changes to the printer. So we're hoping to finalize everything for the warrant next week, but if something slips and we need to redo it the next week, we understand. But it sounds like we'll have a revised recommendation or at least hear no change from the Capital Improvement Planning Committee this Friday-ish, and we'll be able to vote that next week.
Exactly.
Questions on Fire Station Building Committee? And we did hear back, I did speak with Steve Morash, and he said even if the Capital Improvement Planning Committee ended up voting no increase, no appropriation, or the Warrant Committee couldn't come up with the money for whatever reason, it is also his preference that we do go ahead and recommend that the committee be formed even without any appropriation so that they can move forward if they're able to come up with funding somewhere else.
Right. Okay, the other article is the roadway special purpose stabilization fund. We're still waiting for town council to come back.
Katie here somewhere? Did she want to come back?
She may want to come back into this. So there's a couple of issues. There's a couple issues that town council right now is researching. Number one, the municipal modernization bill made some changes to special purpose stabilization funds. He's not sure how that impacts the type of stabilization fund that we're proposing to do. I don't think it impacts it at all, but he wanted to research that a little bit more. Basically, the change in the municipal modernization bill allowed you to set up special purpose stabilization funds. If the source of the revenue is other than tax revenue, it doesn't need appropriation. If you can find a stream of revenue that's basically just other local funds, you can form a special purpose stabilization fund and fund it without appropriation. In other words, without going to town meeting. But I don't see any other changes in there that would impact what we want to do. He believes that the wording of the warrant article can be very general and that everything will be in the recommendation in terms of how it's posed. And we also believe that it will require 2 override votes. One for the general operating override and a second one for funding the special purpose stabilization fund. Whether they can be in the same question, 2 sub-questions or just 2 questions, that I don't know.
So we're waiting to hear back from town council on that?
Long and short, yeah.
Because that's going to start to look like a menu override, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, although they're obviously very different. One is a very, very special purpose, and special purpose stabilization. I think the only way that you can get it earmarked that way is for it to be a separate vote.
Yeah. Okay. Questions or concerns? So we're going to continue to put off a vote on the Fire Station Building Committee until we hear back from Capital Improvement Planning Committee on Friday, and also until we hear back on the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund on the roadways from Town Council. And hopefully he'll be able to get back to us by Wednesday. I have a couple of other questions in to him as well on the revolving funds. I think that might be it for the Board of Selectmen.
I think it is.
Did we cover that, we did reopen and close the warrant tonight to substitute the consolidated facilities revolving fund article just for the,
Michael Dennehy emailed it to me just a minute ago, I think, and I didn't
So that
realize
is
why it came.
the
so-
broader article.
All right.
in response to the issue raised by Steve.
No, not yet. I forgot. Yeah, we wanted to discuss the reserve fund transfers tonight. So if you all want to stay for that, or if just Katie wants to stay for that. Let me just finish that point. Katie, you were saying that Michael emailed me the article, so we need to vote that or re-vote it, either way, right?
I thought you hadn't voted it yet, had you? Because there was an open question from Steve as to whether it could apply to other buildings other
Okay.
than Town Hall.
So, but it's still, we still need to hear back from town council on the recommendation either way, so we're not going to take any
Yes.
action on that tonight.
Correct, yeah.
Right, but when we do, we'll take action on the version you sent this evening.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. So then, the Board of Selectmen had submitted a reserve fund transfer request for the amount of time that there was overlap in the town administrator position, and also the change in compensation for when we changed town administrators. And I think that the total amount of the request was $59,933, and we had asked you, Chair Conlon, to provide us some backup for that. I don't have it on the screen right here in front of me, but I could go find it, but I think I sent that out to everybody, showed the math behind it. Do folks have questions? Oh, good, you printed it. Thank you so much. Do folks have questions on this amount of money? Is there anything else you need to know before we vote on this? To refresh people's memory, it was about $30,000 for the town administrator overlap for the time period December 2016 to January 2017. The strong town administrator pay differential was about $7,000. The accrued time payout was about $23,000 for a total of $59,993. Yes, Steve.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Okay.
So as I was looking through this and comparing it with last year's budget, and what jumped out at me a little bit, we hired an assistant town administrator and a town administrator. The assistant town administrator is a woman being paid less than the guy that was doing the job. The town administrator is a male getting paid more than the woman doing it before him. And I don't want to get into the politics of that because we could spend a lot of time on it, but when things like that become a pattern instead of an isolated incident, you do expose yourself to judgments and settlements, and I just hope going forward we'll be aware of that and make sure that it doesn't become a pattern.
Obviously, the town administrator's contract is subject to negotiation between the board and the candidate. I can't speak, because I don't have the information in front of me about the assistant town administrator position. I mean, her predecessor was someone who had been an employee of the town for 9 or 10 years, I think. He
Yes.
started in the Board of Health, and probably by going up steps and lanes, was at a salary when he left that was higher than what the current assistant town administrator started at. So I'm think because that role really hasn't changed since even when Michael Blanchard held the role. At that point, it had become really a human resources position. So I guess at the very beginning, he was doing half and half, maybe, but shortly into his term, it really became more of a full-time HR position. So, I mean, without any data in front of us, that's all I can guess,
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
it
I'm really
probably
not
is a matter
sure.
of the steps and lanes and the length of his
It probably
employment.
was, it probably was.
And
yeah.
then with regard to the town administrator, the search committee set the bar at a different scale to be able to recruit, to recruit and retain. So that was a difference based upon, the prior town administrator had a certain range. And so this was created to be able to go out and recruit more people, okay, to go for that job. And I think it was a much higher standard. I believe it was in the 75th percentile. And it was very comparable to
Right.
several towns that we compare ourselves to. I know the Town Government Study Committee had done a lot of work in comparable towns, and it's what we had compared ourselves to. So that's probably some of the reason for that jump.
Any other questions or comments? Maggie?
I'm just trying to wrap myself around the 31 weeks. Why are we paying the pay scale differential. In my opinion, she never lived up to her contract. I know I mentioned this before. She never got the 3 college credits that she was supposed to do when she was elected as
Yeah,
town
Mr. Chairman,
administrator.
just with all due respect, I'm going to ask that, because we're talking about an employee of the town for 20 years, and
I'm
this
just
is the
talking about
comments are-
contracts.
We've addressed this at a past meeting. I did get up to respond to the educational requirement issue that Ms. McAvini raised. And I think we should keep our comments so that they're not speaking to someone's,
I'm not speaking about
whether or
her.
not they satisfied the terms of a contract, that the former town administrator certainly did, and the board did relax the requirements that a prior board had set and change the requirements. So I think that's been asked and answered.
Well, Katie, my concern is the board going to relax someone else's requirements to get paid based upon the contract stating that they have to do something? What's to stop that from happening in the future?
It would be up to the Board of Selectmen at the time to evaluate the issue at the time, I suppose, but your objection is noted, Maggie.
Thank you.
Anybody else? May I have a motion on the reserve fund transfer request, if anybody so chooses?
A
Yes,
motion to approve the reserve fund transfer request.
for
As written on the
$59,900.
board,
Okay,
$10,933.
One second.
thank you, Jonathan. Discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? One opposed? Anybody not voting? No, okay. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Same to you.
There's one other reserve fund transfer request from the cemetery that I'd like to discuss quickly. We can keep putting this off if you want. We can't put it off any later than June. But I just want to make sure that this is in everybody's memory, that when the Warrant Committee last year voted the cemetery budget, they were unaware of a change in employment that was about to happen, and we found out about it on the night of town meeting. And so the Warrant Committee at that time voted to not make any change to the budget and to put off until this year the impact of that.